good night, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bouyon. We're celebrating our 43rd independence anniversary. So it's a celebration because we, 7 years shy of 50. And 50 is a big thing. So we're happy today. I'm really pleased today to have with me a very special gentleman, somebody I highly regard as being so excellent. So I want to thank Dr. Jimmy Fletcher. I'll refer to him as Jimmy if that's fine with you tonight, Jimmy, for our discussion.
Yes, it is.
All right. So I just want to welcome him on the show because, sometimes, you try to get the people that you want on a show and you're not able to. But I was so happy when I extended an invitation and with no hesitation, he said, Peter, I'm delighted to be part of your show. So with no further ado, let me introduce you to the son of the soil, Dr. Jimmy Fletcher. Jimmy, I want to give you the opportunity to tell the audience who exactly is this brilliant mind. And I say that's not your words, that's my words. This brilliant mind sitting here with us to discuss our independence and to discuss what happened prior to independence and what happened post-independence. So thank you for accepting to be on Bouyon, and thank you so much for being on our show tonight.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for inviting me, and good evening, everyone, wherever you're watching, and particularly to St. Lucians in St. Lucia and in the diaspora. It's really good to be here to talk to you tonight on Peter's program to discuss our independence 43. As Peter said, we're 7 years short of 50. So I guess the first question you asked me is, who am I? Well, yes, I am a son of the soil. I was born in the heart of Castries on the corner of Marion Street and Coral Street, which is where I think I lived the first 10 years of my life, corner of Marion Street and Coral Street, to a father who was a taxi driver and a mother who was also involved in the business. So I grew up within a taxi business. I grew up within a small business in St. Lucia, a small business that kind of grew with the tourism industry. I was born in 1963, so just to put that into some level of perspective. And when you grow up in a taxi business, you grow up among taxi drivers, there are three things that you learn how to do. You learn how to play dominoes, you learn how to play drafts, and to the horror and chagrin of my mother, you learn how to curse in Creole. And unfortunately, I learned all three at a very tender age. Luckily, I don't curse as much as I used to when I was a little boy. You didn't know any better, so you thought that the words you heard coming from the taxi drivers were normal. And there was one particular experience I had with a priest that I will not repeat on this show that caused my mother a lot of grief. Innocently, a young boy just repeating the words that he heard. So anyway, I was born in Castries. At the age of 10, we moved from the corner of Coral Street and Marion Street to the corner of Coral Street and Grass Street. And I lived there probably for the next 20 years of my life. So I'm a Castries boy. I went to the St. Aloysius RC Boys infant and primary school. From there, I went to St. Mary's College. I was lucky. Back then, you didn't have to be 11 years old to get to sit common entrance or to be admitted into secondary school. So actually, when I passed for St. Mary's College, I was only 9 years old. So yeah, when I went to St. Mary's College, I just turned 10. And that kind of put me at a bit of a disadvantage because I was always younger than all of my contemporaries in class. I was always a little boy. Not figuratively because I was kind of plump at the time, but literally I was the little boy in the class, the youngest in the class. And I did my 5 years at St. Mary's College. From there, I went on to the St. Lucia A-Level College. It wasn't yet the South Louis Community College, it was the St. Lucia A-Level College. Did my 2 years there. After that, I worked for a year in the Department of Inland Revenue as a junior clerk in the PAYE section. Very interestingly, my supervisor in the PAYE section in the Inland Revenue Department is the current Acting Governor General of St. Lucia, Mr. Errol Charles. He was my first supervisor. When I left A-Level, went to work, Mr. Charles was my first supervisor. And after that, I went off to Canada, did an honors degree in biochemistry at the University of Ottawa, came back to St. Lucia, worked for 1 year as a teacher at the Leon Hess Comprehensive Secondary School. Quite interesting, it was only the second year of the Leon Hess Comprehensive Secondary School. So I was kind of very involved in the formative years of that school. And then I went on to England, to the University of Cambridge, where I did a PhD in plant physiology. Came back after 3 years, worked in the produce chemist laboratory at the Union Agricultural Station for 4 years. I kind of left there because I didn't feel I wasn't getting out of the job what I really wanted. I just found that my talents or skills or whatever I wanted to do was not being realized. So I went into consulting as much as I could have been a consultant at that early age. Fortunately, I got some work with the OECS and kept me busy for a while. And then in 1997, when the Labour Party, before that, I was involved in a couple of organizations, president of the St. Lucia Guild of Graduates, followed on from Mario Michel, now Justice Mario Michel. I was his vice president when Mario was president, and I became president. The Guild was very active back then, did a lot of work, a lot of panel discussions, a lot of, trying to get critical thinking going on many of the heavy political, social, and economic issues of the day. And then when the Labour Party won in 1997, Dr. Anthony asked me to chair the National Development Corporation, which I did for a year. And then I became the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries for 5 years. And then the cabinet secretary and the permanent secretary in the office of the Prime Minister for another 4 years, I think it was. Yes. And then I became, 3 years. Then the Labour Party lost and I went into consulting, did some consulting for a while, enjoyed it. And then in 2011, when the Labour Party got back into office, Dr. Anthony invited me to come in as his Minister for Public Service, Sustainable Development, Energy, Science and Technology, which I did from 2011 to 2016. And from 2016, I've been really running my own company, Soloricon, which is an acronym for Solutions-Oriented Consulting. And we do consulting in areas of climate change, sustainable energy, water policy, public policy, and things of that nature, sustainable development for small island developing states. So that's me in a nutshell. I am married, my lovely wife, been married for 17 years now. And yeah, so that's me.
When I said a brilliant mind, I definitely literally meant a brilliant mind. He passes common entrance at the age of 9. All right, so that tells you all. And then look at all of the positions he held as well. So we'll get into that a little bit. But before I ask you my next question, Jimmy, let's just give a big shout out to all the individuals who have joined us tonight, because Bouyon is an interactive show. We try our best to involve everyone. So I want to say good night to everyone. Leona Joseph, Gemma, Erna, Nadine, Adela, Miss Cleary, good night to you. Good night to everyone who has joined us. I want to thank you guys so much for being part of Bouyon and for viewing us tonight. I know it's a lot happening tonight. Invader is in New York tonight. And
good.
Yeah, and he's performing. So, we've been pushing this show a lot on Watch Radio. So he's performing tonight. So when I leave here, I'm going to pass by. But Invader promised me he's not going to perform until I get there. So so I take his word for it. So if you intend to go down to Invader, it's okay. You can stay and listen to the show, and then he'll only perform when I get there. So you can get there together with me. Thank you, Andrina, for your 75 stars. Thank you so much, guys. We appreciate your love. Jimmy, you've held so many different positions in your lifetime. You've held positions regionally, all over. So tell us a little bit about some of the positions that you've held and which ones were probably most meaningful to you.
Okay, I think the one that I probably derived the greatest satisfaction from was the one that I was in for the shortest period, and that was when I taught at the Leon Comprehensive Secondary School. I taught biology and integrated science there when I just returned from university after having done my first degree. So that was 1986 to 1987. And it was a great time for me, just working in a new school environment, teaching. I like communicating, I like teaching, I like imparting the knowledge that I've been able to acquire. And I think that probably was, interestingly, one of my first serious work experiences. Clearly as an adult, I won't count my year at Inland Revenue and the times I worked there on holidays when I came back from Canada on summer holidays. But I think that year, teaching at Leon Hess would rank as one of my most fulfilling years. I like my time at the Ministry of Agriculture as permanent secretary. We had a very good team. I had an excellent team working with me in forestry, in agriculture, in fisheries, and we were able to do some good things there. You know, change the culture of the ministry, change the way the ministry was perceived. It was a very trying time because that coincided with the period when the banana industry was going through some serious turmoil with the loss of our preferential access, and having to navigate that was quite challenging, and try to get the other sectors to come on board, like the livestock sector, fisheries, etc. And we did some good things there. Built fish landing facilities. That's when we did the fish landing facilities in Beaufort, in Choiseul, and in Soufrière. So that was quite an interesting period. I think the period of greatest growth for me was the time I spent, 3 years I spent at the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States as the director of the Social and Sustainable Development Division. But there I had responsibility for the portfolios of energy, water, environment, sports, education, health, and social policy. And I think that's when it forced me to grow, because some of these areas were quite new to me. I had never done much work in education, in health, or in social policy. Sports I was interested in just casually as a sports fan. You like cricket, you like football, you like basketball. But to actually be involved and manage a sports program across the nine countries of the OECS, that's the 6 independent member states, and Anguilla, Montserrat, and the BVI. And also health. We did a lot of work with HIV/AIDS and responding to the HIV/AIDS crisis at the time with money from the Global Fund and the Clinton Foundation, and social policy. So I had to learn a lot about these things. And I think that served me really well when I became a minister, because I was in that mode of learning, of constantly wanting to expand the horizons of my understanding, and feeling that there was nothing that I could not get into. And those 3 years spent at the OECS with a group of excellent professionals who taught me so much in education, on the environment, on energy, on climate change. I think that's where my love for climate change started. And so yeah, when I became a minister, I kept that same energy, that same quest for wanting to learn, for wanting to be able to stand toe-to-toe with my technical people and discuss issues with them, not playing the part of the technical person, but clearly being knowledgeable enough about the subject so that you could have a discussion with them, so that when you're setting policy from a position of information. So I think the most fulfilling was my year spent teaching, and the period of greatest growth for me was my 3 years at the OECS Secretariat. And I also enjoyed a lot my time as a minister because of what we were able to do in so many of the sectors. And ICT, we established community ICT sectors across the island. In energy, how we started transforming the energy sector and moving towards renewables. Water, with the new water projects that we built all over the place, but most certainly in climate change, and helping St. Lucia become a globally recognized leader on climate change. I don't think those were quite satisfying for me.
Wow, I guess your years as a teacher, I guess that was good, because you were molding lives and you were changing lives, and that's awesome. So I want to say, let me just Jimmy, before we continue, I just want to read a comment that somebody just put in the chat, and I'm just going to ask you to respond to it. Andrina Alexander said, "Good evening, Mr. Fletcher. Good evening. Mr. Fletcher is a very good person. We need more people like him in politics." So what?
If I had $10 for every time somebody said that to me, I probably would be able to fund all of my activities. I probably would have been able to retire by now. It's certainly a sentiment. I really appreciate it. Every time somebody says that to me, I'm really humbled, and feel that, okay, it's because whatever I've done or whatever I continue to do is recognized, and people feel that there's value to it, and particularly value to it in the political arena. I've never said never. In the beginning, I said no for representational politics. I think in the last 4 or 5 years, I've warmed to the idea a lot more. But and maybe we can get into it a little bit more later on, but there needs to be a complete change in the way in which we view politics, in the way in which politicians present themselves, in the way in which politicians accept advice, and interact with people. Our politicians behave, there's something about getting into politics, I think, that changes the psyche of many people, not all, but many people. It makes them believe that they can go from being Clark Kent one day to Superman the next day, that just by virtue of winning an election, that you suddenly know everything and you can't take constructive criticism anymore. You don't need to consult with people. You don't need to listen to what not just your inner circle is saying to you, not just your echo chamber, your supporters, but what other people are saying to you. And you have to be able to accept criticism and understand that you're governing on behalf of everyone. And I think too much of our politics now has become really parochial, just focus on pleasing party supporters as opposed to doing what's best for the country. And that really is my biggest lamentation about politics, that I think we've lost the plot somewhere with our politics, and we have to find a way to get it back, because the challenges that are confronting us as a small island developing state are such that you can't divide the country into Flabo and Labour. You can't decide that, okay, boy, every time the UWP is in office, you're only going to check for your UWP supporters, or you're only going to bring in UWP supporters into critical positions. And the same thing with the Labour Party. When Labour Party is in office, that all of the people who hold critical positions, important positions, are non-Labour Party supporters. We only have 185,000 people in St. Lucia. We need to use every single resource at our disposal, every single human resource at our disposal. And I'm sorry, but we have not been doing that since independence. This country is blessed with a wealth of human resources. We have people who've done well. I'm not just talking about people who've gone on and studied. We have people who have skills, have abilities that transcend book knowledge, transcend university education, but they are being used only when their party is in power, and when their party is not in power, then they're not being looked at. And that is killing this country. The only way, confronted with so many challenges that we are confronted with, the only way we can move forward is to harness the abilities and the skills of everyone, and be ready to take some criticism from people who don't support you. And that is my biggest challenge and my biggest criticism of our politics right now. It's not doing that. And that has to change. Otherwise, we'll continue spinning top in mud. We'll continue not going anywhere. And it's not helping us.
I totally agree with you. And that just tells me I need to bring you back on another show so we could talk about politics. We could get into that. Although Bouyon is not a political show, but we could certainly do politics, and not siding with one party over the other, but talking about politics generally. Let's say, Gemma, I want to say thank you so much for your stars. Thank you so much. Glenna Gabriel, I want to thank you so much. He said, well said, Mr. Fletcher. And that's why he's on the show tonight, because I know he's the man with the knowledge. So Jimmy, before we got let's talk about independence a little bit. Before we became independent, we were an associated state. And that happened because I think the Federation trying to integrate the West Indies failed. And at the time, England didn't know what to do, or the motherland didn't know what to do, right? So they put us in that kind of holding position because they were not sure what they wanted to do next. And of course, John Compton, our premier at the time, decided, you know what, or maybe even before that, he was thinking about it, but let's move forward and become an independent state, because the big countries had already done so, like Jamaica and so on, had already done that. So if you get, instead of those small islands, they're trying to get all of us to work together, but that wasn't happening. So he decided, let's become an independent state. So I want to put you in the mindset of John Compton in that time. Tell me what you think he was thinking, and kind of what was his vision in terms of bringing us into independence.
Well, that's actually easy, because what I can do is actually repeat to you the words of John Compton, both when we went into associated statehood and then when he was taking us into independence. And it's quite interesting, because you see how John Compton's thinking evolved. You also see how the mind of a shrewd politician works. And I'm reading from A History of St. Lucia, written by Jolene Harmison, Guy Ellis, and Robert DeVoe. And it says that, Compton requested internal self-governance instead of independence and association. So he wanted something slightly different to what the British were giving. And when the British decided that it was going to be associated statehood, John Compton actually launched, and the book says it, he launched a scathing attack on the British government for what he saw as its failure to respond to the needs of the islands. In a no-nonsense speech that was widely covered in the media, Compton called the new constitution completely meaningless, saying that without economic support, it carried the seeds of its own futility. It would be less than honest to pretend that this proposed association could be termed voluntary, Compton added. The color of our skins is against us, and a government, even one that professes democracy, is pleased to legislate and to propound the doctrine of second-class citizenship for people of another color. So John Compton was clear, he was not happy with this whole construct of associated statehood because he felt, Compton always felt that we needed economic power. And that actually is what drove John Compton towards independence in 1979. Because when you read what Tennyson Joseph, for example, writes in his book, Decolonization in St. Lucia, he says very clearly that John Compton insisted that getting into becoming independent was really about managing the economy of your country. In fact, I think he said, I'm just trying to get the exact quote. He says, matters will be affecting us in which we have no voice, and areas of expertise will exist to which we have no access. So John Compton saw independence as a tool to cause or to advance the economic development of the country. He felt that, look, there were many things that were happening in that period. The pound had devalued. We had a serious energy crisis. And he was looking to see how we could reshape the economy of this country. And he felt that we needed to get access to new sources of foreign aid that we could not get as an associated state. For example, we could not be a member of the UN, and he felt that there were probably opportunities there for us. But I think, interestingly, John Compton also saw, because the tourism industry was growing and developing at the time, one of the things that the UK had control over, well, it had control over defense, but it also had control over our external affairs. And within the external affairs was civil aviation. So negotiating new treaties, new air rights with new carriers that were not British carriers required the permission and the agreement of the British government. So John Compton saw that for him to expand the tourism industry and to get these new flights, from the US and Canada coming in, he wanted to be able to control that himself. So for him, independence was always an economic issue. It wasn't, as many others saw independence, as an issue of nationalism, the concept of self-determination. I think John Compton's construct of independence was so that he would have, St. Lucians would have complete control of decision-making where the economy was concerned. The strange thing is, though, that when you look at the economic model that Sir John Compton pursued, what he did really was basically move to the US, so shift the gaze from the United Kingdom to the United States of America as this power, this economic power that would invest in St. Lucia. So he was very, very strong on foreign direct investment coming in from the US. That was around the same time that Amarada Hess came into St. Lucia and set up the transshipment terminal in cul-de-sac. The time manufacturing was starting to move. So I think John Compton's overriding impulse for independence was to control the economic levers of the country. I think that's how we saw it. And that's what created a bit of a friction between him and the opposition, then the St. Lucia Labour Party, and also some of the other organizations that were like the Workers' Revolutionary Movement, the St. Lucia Action Movement, which came out of the forum. They saw independence as more of a nationalistic thing, more of us controlling our destiny, us deciding who we would associate with. But Compton said that independence is not an emotional issue. These were his words. So it was for him a clear economic imperative, I think, trying to get control of the economic levers of the country.
Let me ask you, somebody just made a comment, and I'm going to read it out, and I would like you to share your thoughts. Walter Hippolyte just said, not entirely correct. The only reason we became independent was because we were planning on forming a Caribbean Union, same as the European Union. Then the thing happened with Grenada, and it all fell apart.
Well, I don't think that's exactly the case. I think, and you alluded to it earlier, the Federation was what was supposed to have taken all of us into independence. We were supposed to go as a unit into independence through the Federation. When the Federation collapsed in 1962, it caused many of these countries to look to see, okay, how can we now start breaking? And to be honest, the British government, I think, wanted to start breaking that umbilical cord attachment that it had to many of these countries. So Jamaica became independent in 1962. Trinidad, I think, followed soon afterwards in 1962. Guyana then came in 66. Barbados, the Bahamas. One by one, these countries became independent because I don't think the British government really saw much interest in continuing an association with these islands. So it was very happy to cause the independence of these countries from the UK, because we weren't producing goods. We weren't of economic benefit to the UK in the way we were before. And I think that was really the driving impetus. There were other things around, yes, but I think the whole politics of the geopolitics at the time was what really caused, and the collapse of the Federation clearly accelerated the move of all of these islands toward independence. And if you check, I mean, after St. Lucia, Grenada became independent, then Suriname, then Dominica, then St. Lucia, then St. Vincent, then Belize, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, one by one, they all became independent because trust me, if the British government had seen economic value in keeping an attachment with these islands, it would not have allowed this. It would not have acquiesced so quickly to our request for independence. So we share a slightly different opinion there.
All right, thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about our economy, how things were prior to independence. What do you think the state of our, I want to use that word, the state of our union was? How do you feel the state of our economy was? How was St. Lucia catering for the citizens financially, economically, socially? What are your views on these?
Well, we did not have responsibility for defense and for external affairs, but we had responsibility for everything else. The economy of St. Lucia in 1979, when we became independent, was one that was very heavily based on the banana industry as the main export sector. Fortunately, though, we still had a coconut industry, and particularly value added in the coconut industry, because we were processing coconut oil at the time, which was quite lucrative for us. And we also had a cocoa industry that was, so we were exporting cocoa, we were exporting coconuts, we were exporting bananas, but bananas was the dominant crop. And if you look at how GDP, agriculture GDP moved there, it moved however bananas went. If there was a drop in banana production, there was a drop in agricultural GDP. When banana production went up, GDP from the agricultural sector went up. The tourism industry was starting to move. I mean, there were many things. I can't remember the exact timing, but because my family was involved in the tourism industry, I remember the days of when there wasn't, the East Coast Road had not been developed. And I remember my father having to wake up early to drive down to Vieux Fort because that was such a tortuous drive. And even more so, if a cruise ship was berthing in Soufrière, waking up early because the drive down to Soufrière was not the 45 to 50-minute drive that it is now. It was a much longer drive. So, many things were happening around then that caused the tourism industry to start to move. So you had an economy that was still very agrarian, still very much based on agriculture, but tourism was starting to move, and manufacturing was also starting to develop. And I think that's one of the things that Compton wanted, because you were able, after independence, you were able to get many of the US firms to come into Vieux Fort and establish these the work out of these factory shells, producing apparel and electronic items and other things that kept manufacturing buoyant until the North American Free Trade Association, Free Trade Agreement, came on board, and Mexico entered the scene, and we were no longer as attractive to these US firms to come and take advantage of long tax holidays, cheaper labor. They were able to get that out of Mexico. So I think our economy was a little bit more buoyant back then, because although it was still very much based on bananas, there were other things going on. We don't really have that much of a manufacturing sector, unless you want to look at what's happening with Barron Foods and what's happening in the water industry, the water sector, where all we're doing really is just taking Wasco water, passing it through reverse osmosis and putting it out as bottled water. We don't have the level of manufacturing that we had back then. And I think that's something that we need to work on, and we can work on it by looking at the cost of energy, because one of the serious impediments to manufacturing in St. Lucia is the high cost of electricity. electricity is a big input in manufacturing. And when you're paying 40 US cents per kilowatt hour for electricity in St. Lucia, compared to Trinidad and Tobago, that's paying 7 cents, 7 US cents per kilowatt hour, there's no way you can compete with Trinidad in manufacturing. So we have to look at how we can get the price of electricity down through renewables and other things like that. So the short answer to your question is I think our industry was a little bit more interesting then. Sorry, the economy was a little bit more interesting then, but it was still very much an agriculture, banana-based industry. Now it is one that tourism is a major mover, but you also have things like construction and other things that contribute to our GDP. But tourism has basically taken the place of agriculture. Where agriculture was in 1979 is where tourism is in 2021.
Wow, thank you so much for that. Let me just say thank you so much, Walter, for your comment. Vil, I want to say thank you guys so much. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us on Bouyon tonight. Of course, we're celebrating our 43rd independence anniversary. We're 7 years shy of 50. You know, I want to thank my guest, Dr. Jimmy Fletcher, who has agreed to be on this show with me tonight. So thank you so much for accepting my invitation. You know, growing up, you know, I was born in the 70s, so I'm a 70s baby, right? So when we became independent, I was 9 years old, thereabout, just shy of 9. I was 8, going to be 9 in the month of April. But one of the things I remember very clearly was the growing up, the celebration, all of the, you know, the effort that was put into when I was at school. I went to the St. Aloysius RC Boys Primary as well. And, you know, how we used to treat the celebration of independence. To me, these days, we don't see that same impetus. We don't see that same energy reflected in the celebration. What do you think is the contributing factor to the lack of interest in celebrating our independence?
I think there are a few factors. One, and the organizers will maybe forgive me, maybe not forgive me for saying this, but I think the celebration is a bit static and boring. You know, the same thing happens every year. Granted, there are one or two new things that come in. So for example, this year you have the Independence Battle Relay. So the battle started up in the north in Cap Estate, and it's going around the island. And you have St. Lucians of all walks of life carrying this battle, very attractive local battle. And that has helped to generate some level of community spirit and community involvement in independence. But apart from that, the activities, first of all, I don't think the government puts enough money into independence celebrations. So the Independence Anniversary Committee, as well-intentioned as it may be, is always hamstrung in what it can do because there's never enough money to plan. And I know that speaking as when I was cabinet secretary, I was the chairman of the St. Lucia National Independence Anniversary Committee, the Standing National Independence Anniversary Committee, and we never had enough money to do the things that we wanted to do. So some years there might be an exhibition and that might attract the attention of people. Other years there wouldn't be. I think we need to get the people we need to change the makeup of the people who plan independence activities. We also need to get independence activities to be more decentralized. The same way Journée Creole became decentralized. And, you know, in the beginning, Journée Creole was held in 1 or 2 communities, largely managed by the Folk Research Center. Before COVID, Journée Creole really took on a life of its own. Every community was doing its own Journée Creole. People were doing their own individualized Journée Creoles at their homes or in their communities. We need to get independence to become that, where people take ownership of independence. It's not seen as a government-led, a government-directed, a government-mandated thing, but it's something that everybody has an interest in. So, and I think because of that sameness, because of that monotony, because of that static nature of independence, people are basically turned off. Yeah, okay, you have the military parade, you have the ecumenical service, you still have a youth rally. These things are all standard, but how are we celebrating our independence? How are the communities involved in appreciating the fact that for 43 years now, we've been managing our own affairs? What does independence mean to them? I don't think we've been able to translate that to the community level. But there's another very big reason independence celebrations have become kind of diluted. And that's because for some strange, inexplicable reason, people now associate the celebration of independence with the party that is in power. So your enthusiasm for independence, and I've seen it in many instances, people's enthusiasm for independence is directly proportional to whether their party is the one planning the activities or their party is not the one planning the activity. So when the United Workers' Party is in power, supporters of the United Workers' Party, I'm not saying across the board, but this has been a general observation, are much more enthusiastic and buoyant, and they're involved, and maybe the government involves them more. When the St. Lucia Labour Party is in power, supporters of the Labour Party are much more engaged, much more involved. Supporters of the UWP are a little blah about it because they kind of feel you, and the Labour Party does the same thing when the UWP is in office. If I celebrate and if I come out, it'll make the government look good. It'll make it, they will be able to boast that we had a really good independence celebration, that, and feathers, you know, kudos to us and feathers in our cap. So independence, for some reason, has become a little politicized, even to the flying of flags. You know, you watch the people who fly flags on their vehicles. And I'm sorry to say, but depending on which party's in power, sometimes it dictates who will fly a flag on their vehicle and who will not. So it really is a function of the politicization of our society, and people now putting too many, politics has divided us too much. And politics has determined how we react to things that should be nationalistic, to things where there ought to be no political consideration at all. I think that has factored into it. But I think the sameness, the static nature of our independence celebrations, and our inability to decentralize it and to make it a community thing, as opposed to something where the focus is on what the state, what the government is doing, I think that has also caused people to say, it's just another holiday for me. I'll use that day to do something else.
You know, so well said, and right into the next question I have for you. But before I do that, let me just say good night to everyone who has joined us. Adela Seeley just said, when independence celebration was more localized, people were more open to participate in independence. And Sabina Daniel, I want to say good night to you. Thank you so much. I want to say good night to Kamina as well. Nadine Farrell, good night. Thank you so much, guys. If I didn't call your name, don't take any offense to it. It's just that we have a lot to talk about tonight, so I'm trying to get through calling out names quickly. You know, Jimmy, let's examine the theme for this year's uh, independence celebration. Douvan Ansanm, celebrating our people. You know, I was in St. Lucia prior to elections, and firsthand I saw the divide. Different political parties, people were actually upset with each other because of their political alliances, and I was like, I could, you know, not that I couldn't believe it, but it was strange sometimes to just see friends going at each other because of because of the party that they support. And you know, and sometimes I tell my partners, I say, "Yo, stop! It's politics. If you want to vote for a party, it's up to you. Let's stop with the nonsense. You know, it's your political decision. It's your decision. You know, if you want to vote for one party as opposed to the other person, let that person make their own decisions." And we've seen the increase in criminal activities and so on in our nation. How we as a nation, as a country, can come together to, you know, acknowledging the theme of this year's independence. How can we work together to um, kind of unite that divide that's going on between us?
I think with the understanding that independence is not a destination, it's a journey, and it's something that we constantly have to work towards. It's something that we constantly have to make effort to improve upon. And the same thing with the theme. Douvan Ansanm, just by saying Douvan Ansanm this year, celebrating our people and announcing that as a theme that the Standing National Independence Anniversary Committee has come up with. That doesn't mean that we're going to be Douvan Ansanm. That doesn't mean that we're going to move forward together and that we're going to celebrate each other. There has to be a deliberate effort by all concerned to cultivate that spirit of oneness, that spirit of togetherness, that is not just for the few days leading up to and after independence, but for the entire year. And so Douvan Ansanm really should be a theme that is recurring. And I think that's part of my problem with the selection of themes for independence, that every year we come up with a different theme. But again, going back to my point that independence is a journey, it's not a destination. Douvan Ansanm is not something that we decide is our theme this year and all of a sudden we Douvan Ansanm. Douvan Ansanm has to be something that we work towards. It has to be something that we say we commit to, everyone, government, SLP, UWP, people who take the vaccination, which is another thing that's dividing us in this country, people who take the vaccine and people who don't take the vaccine. There's so many things dividing us in this country that we have to agree that the one thing that unites us is the fact that we St. Lucia. The one thing that defines who we are and determines how the world looks at us is the fact that we're St. Lucian. The one thing for which we get no assistance is our St. Lucianness. We have to do this together. We cannot do this as a set of separate people, everyone pulling in a different direction, everyone with their own agenda. So I'm hoping that Douvan Ansanm is not just seen as a theme for this year's independence anniversary, and people asked to, okay, whatever you do, whatever activities you have, do it around the theme of Douvan Ansanm. I hope that the government and the people who are involved in the planning of independence decide that Douvan Ansanm is our theme moving forward, that this is really what determines who we are. That if we're not together as a people, then it really doesn't matter what theme you have next year. You could say climbing the heights of the commanding heights as a people, or whatever lofty theme they come up with. But that does not matter if we're not together as a people. And so I am hoping that this is not just some other theme, some slogan taken so that we have a nice catchy theme for Independence 43. It is something that we use as our defining goal for this country moving forward, that we're going to try our best to unite people, unite them around the things that matter to us, unite them around healthcare, unite them around economic opportunity, unite them around food security, unite them around the development of our rural sector, unite them around making sure that we get more from the tourism industry, unite them around ensuring that we do not lose our patrimony and our lands are not sold, all our lands are not sold to foreign interests, and we have access to our beaches, unite them around support for our young people, unite them around caring for our elderly. That's what Douvan Ansanm has to be about. And you can't do that just within 1 week or 2 weeks of independence. It has to be something that the country commits to as a goal moving forward for the next 5-10 years. Otherwise, this will just be another nice theme. I'm sure if I asked you what was the theme last year or the theme 5 years ago, you can't remember. So, I don't want this theme to be just like all of these other themes. That's something we pluck out of a hat and we produce some t-shirts and everything, and next year people forget what it was. Not only do they forget the theme, but they forget what it is that we're working towards with that theme.
Thank you. So well said. Before we continue, let me say good night to Peter Thomas. Just made a comment. Jimmy, he said, did Jimmy read about my observation that there is what is called selective patriotism? I am only patriotic when my party is in power. The government, I'm sorry to say, perpetuate this.
Yes, Peter, I read that. I was quite pleased with that. I forgot to like it. Peter is someone I have a lot of time for on Facebook because he usually takes these positions that are not party, not political. So yes, Peter, I agree with you, and that's what I mean about the celebration is muted among this year. Independence celebrations are muted among non-supporters of the St. Lucia Labour Party. A few years ago, independence celebrations were muted among supporters of the St. Lucia Labour Party. And even the way in which invitations are given out. We have to get past this. We have to get past this infantile thing that my party is in power. So the people who get invited to events are the people who support me. The people who get invited to the Prime Minister's cocktail are the supporters of the St. Lucia Labour Party as they are now, or when Alan Chaste was in office, are the supporters of the United Workers' Party. This is the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. And if the Prime Minister is having a cocktail, the people who should be invited to it are the St. Lucians, are people who matter in St. Lucia, and not just matter because of economic status, but matter because they are a teacher in a community, they're a fisher in Dennery, they are a cocoa farmer in Soufrière. They're people who are contributing to our economy, contributing to the social development of this country. Unfortunately, we do not treat, and also the people who get invitations and your party is not in power, suck it up and go. Don't feel bad that you're going there and you're surrounded by a whole set of Labour Party people. No, you're surrounded by a whole set of St. Lucians. You were invited as a St. Lucian, I hope. So attend as a St. Lucian. So, that's what I'm saying. There has to be a change in our mindset, a change in the way in which we are. If we're going to approach independence, the time when we became adults and we got responsibility for everything, not just our own internal governance, but our external relations, our defense, how we negotiate trade agreements, we became responsible. That's when we left our mother's home and we became big men and women. if we're going to be divided over that, then what are we not going to be divided over? So yes, Peter, I saw your point, and I agree with you. We do have selective patriotism.
Wow, totally, totally. Let's say goodnight to Adela. Just said, unity is strength only if we decide to work together and help and encourage each other along the way. Nadine Farrell, good night to you. Sabina, thank you for your stars. Thank you so much. Papet, good night to you as well. I want to say good night to Priska D. Thank you so much. He said, well said, Dr. Fletcher. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Yari, for all of that. Peter just said, the people who get appointed to the organizing and planning of the observance are party supporters in the main as well. Both sides are engaged in. And you know, I'll tell you something, and it's just the same thing that you were saying. It's so political, and we politicize everything when it shouldn't be. You know, when a party wins an election, it's not the party who've won, the party have won. But when you start governance, it's the people. You concerned about all the people, not just some of the people, but the entire country is your responsibility. You're responsible for every single person, whether the UWP or whether the SLP or whatever party that is. Jimmy, let me ask you, a small country like ours, with the limited resources that we have, can we actually truly be independent? And what, in your views, what is independence? We know what the Webster Dictionary describe independence as being, but what is really independence?
Independence is when you get your driver's license, all the time you've been learning to drive and you've had somebody next to you. And if you make a mistake, there's somebody to correct you. Independence is when you get your driver's license and you go out in that vehicle for the first time with nobody next to you. And you're on this road in a vehicle, and you have people moving at different speeds around you, and you have to make your own decisions. You have to determine how quickly you drive, how close you stick to the corner. You have to, that's the analogy for me. Up until we were independent, we always had somebody on our left or our right guiding us and saying, no, you can't do this, or if you want to do this, you can't drive so quickly, you can't do this. When you become independent, you go out in that vehicle, which is your country, and you navigate it wherever you want to go. And sometimes you might put it in a ditch, sometimes you might have a highway with plain sailing. That's what independence is about. So yes, St. Lucia is independent, as are all the countries that have attained independence, be it from whatever colonial power, the UK, from France, from the Dutch, from Spain. But we will always be vulnerable for many reasons. One, because of our size. We are a small country. So there are certain things that come with smallness of size. It's very difficult to get economies of scale. So we don't have a large market. If somebody in China produces something, that person has billions of people as a market just within China that they can market their product to. If somebody in St. Lucia produces an item, that person has not 180,000 people in St. Lucia, but even smaller than that, as the market in St. Lucia, who they can market that product to. Now, granted, now with the internet and technology, we can move a little further, but those are one of the problems that you have with smallness of size. Also, because we are not blessed with an abundance of natural resources, the only real resource we have is our people, which is what makes it so stupid that we continue dividing them in red and yellow, vaccinated, non-vaccinated, and whatever other thing we do. So that's the only resource we have. We don't have oil, we don't have natural gas, we don't have gold, we don't have diamonds. So you don't have a commodity that everybody wants. So you could generate a lot of income from, which will allow you to be able to pay for whatever developmental activities you want to engage in. We don't do that. We can't do that. We don't have that. Also, because of where we're located in the Atlantic. The hurricane season comes by every year. Keep your fingers crossed, pray to whichever deity you pray to that you don't get hit by a hurricane. If you do get hit, then you're vulnerable. It doesn't matter what type of economic activity you have. You could be like Jamaica when Hurricane Gilbert hit it. It incurred damage equivalent to 365% of its GDP. Most recently, when Hurricane Maria hit Dominica, 226% of its GDP obliterated, damage equivalent to that in the space of 24 hours. So yes, we are independent, but that does not mean that being independent makes you not vulnerable. We will always be vulnerable because of the size of our economy, the size of our population, the openness of our markets. because we're so dependent on tourism. At one point, we were dependent on bananas, and it meant if a hurricane passed through or some disease passed through, our banana crop could be wiped out, and the economic fortunes of people could be destroyed in a short space of time. Now you have tourism, and we saw what COVID did to the tourism industry when you had this unprecedented shutdown in flights. Nobody was coming to the Caribbean. Nobody was coming to St. Lucia. All of a sudden, thousands of people on the breadline. So for that reason, we're independent, but it doesn't mean that we're not vulnerable. What we have to do is to find a way to increase our resilience. So diversify our economy so that we're not so dependent on only one economic sector. Work with our people, empower our people, educate our people so that they can make their own decisions. They also have marketability outside of St. Lucia. They can stay on their computer and they can generate work, they can generate a product, they can generate a service that will be purchased in Europe, in Japan, in Russia, in China, in the United States of America. But most importantly, we have to find a way to unite our people. Because as I said, our most important resource, one can argue our only resource is our people. And if we continue to divide that resource, then we will always be operating at inefficient and suboptimal levels. So yes, to answer your question, Peter, we're independent, and that level of smallness and that level of vulnerability was not a reason for us to not pursue independence. But because we understand what our vulnerabilities are, then I think that's why we have to work on our resilience so that we can be a much more resilient country, regardless of the vulnerabilities that come with a smallness of size, openness of economy, susceptibility to natural disasters like hurricanes and floods and droughts, etc.
Thank you for that, Jimmy. Let's just have we had a few comments here. Joseph Morrison, I want to say good night to you. Party politics is killing our progress. That's what he wrote. And Robert said, I was telling a few St. Lucians in my unit the same thing. Now Dr. Jimmy Fletcher is a true St. Lucian. Talking about what you just spoke about earlier on. And Nadine Farrell said, oh yes, well said, sir. So, we've seen our country post-independence. We've been plagued with poverty. We've been plagued with unemployment, and that's one of the things that hit the youth the most, right? Many governments have come in, and I don't know, they've tried, but they've not succeeded. What do you think that as a nation we can do to kind of solve that problem, if that's a good word to use?
We need to educate and empower our citizens. We seem to be very reluctant to change things. Once we've adopted something, we don't want to change it. The Constitution is one area that I'm dumbfounded why we have been so hesitant to change a constitution. If you look at the Constitution, the 1979 Constitution that we got from the British, that Constitution, I have a copy of both that 79 Constitution, which is the St. Lucia Constitution Order, and I have a copy of the 1967 Constitution, which is our associated statehood constitution. There really is not much difference between the two of them. Even Sir John Compton admitted it. I think Sir John said, let's see what he said. He actually admitted that he said this constitution breaks no new ground, and that is deliberate. So, and that's the same constitution Sir John had a problem with in 1967. So basically, we're operating with a constitution that was drafted for us in associated statehood in 1967. For goodness sake, we're in 2022. So much has happened since then, yet we are reluctant to make any changes to this constitution. And I have friends who continue to state emphatically that the constitution is fine. We don't need to do anything with it. It addresses everything. I'm sorry, but no constitution written in 1967 and handed to us by the British can be fine for present day, modern day St. Lucia. That even without looking at what's in the constitution, there must be things in there that are not facilitating the type of modern society and not dealing with the issues that have now become prevalent now that were not prevalent before. And I'm saying that to segue into our education sector. We have an education system that we have not changed much. I was reading a book, Wounded by School, by Kirsten Dunst, and Kirsten said that if Rip Van Winkle were to return now after 100 years of sleeping, the only two institutions that Rip Van Winkle would recognize would be prisons and schools, because they haven't changed much in 100 years. And I'm sorry, but that actually describes our school system. And that's no fault of the teachers. We have teachers who are doing their best with the limited circumstances, but we have an education system that continues to every year churn out large numbers of children who are not ready for secondary school, but graduate them to secondary school nonetheless. A child scoring 15% or 20% in a common entrance examination cannot be ready for secondary school. If you put that child in a secondary school, there will most likely be only one outcome for that child. We have a system that continues to treat everybody like in the education system like a conveyor belt. So you just have to pass these kids from one grade to another until you get them out of the system, despite the numbers showing us that you have quite a number of young boys dropping out of school or being completely disinterested in school. You have an alarming number of children spending 5 years in secondary school and not coming out of one CXC pass. How can a child spend 5 years in a secondary school and leave that secondary school with not a pass in one subject, and you're happy with that system? You're not saying to yourself that we're failing these children, and yet you want to wonder, well, why do we have such levels of disaffection? Why do we have these kinds of problems with poor choices, uninformed choices being made? That's the reason. Our education system needs to be changed. We're treating everybody the same way, whether you have academic aptitude. If you ask me, Peter, to put together a chest of drawers for you with something, a DIY, I will be horrible at it because I'm not that great with my hands. I'm good on a farm. I'm good because I studied agriculture, so I'm good with plants, but I'm not good with carpentry. So if you were to judge me by my ability to put together a chest of drawers or assemble a desk, I would be a failure. I would be a dropout. But we're doing the same thing with academics. We're saying to children that your ability or the skills that you show in passing these academic subjects will determine whether you're a success or failure. That is a strict way in which we're judging you. We have to find a way to change our education system so that we recognize what people are skilled for and we put them in that direction. That's why I am not a big fan of many policies that say we will have a university graduate in every household. I don't think you need a university graduate in every household. I think you need a skilled person in every household, because I can tell you, in 2018, I worked for 6 months in Dominica after the passage of Hurricane Maria. I was there helping the government set up its climate resilience execution agency. And I would take the ferry back to St. Lucia every fortnight. You know the people who on that ferry with me? Skilled workers, carpenters, tilers, masons, painters. These were the people working, not the graduates, not the university graduates. Those were the people working. So you want to tell me that a skilled carpenter, a skilled mason, somebody skilled in construction is not as important to the economic earning capacity of a household as somebody with a degree in social sciences or natural sciences or law or something? We have to change our construct. We have to change how we view education. And it's not just the accumulation of certificates and academic certificates that determines someone's ability in life. Because I can tell you with my PhD, if you were to hire me to do work in your home, I would be an absolute failure. But you need people who are skilled to construct the buildings, to underpin the economic and social fabric of this country. So I think that is the problem. You know, how we construct our economy, the value we place on certain things, and how we configure our education system to be able to support the kind of society we want to build. I think that's lacking. And what is very lacking is long-term development planning. There's no long-term development planning that takes place in this country. The planning is just in 5-year election cycles. We have not determined where would we like to see this country in 15, 20 years from now. What are we aiming towards? What are the things that we're saying as a civilized society that we will not accept? So the levels of domestic violence in this country. Are we saying, why can we not say that we will work towards reducing domestic violence in this country by 15% by the year 2030? Or that we'll work to reduce violent crime in this country by 20% in the next 5 years. Every year we see the number keep going up. So last year, the most homicides in a year was 60. Last year became 74. So what's our new benchmark? 74. Why can't we not say that we'll put in place a long-term crime reduction plan, which is much bigger than the police, has to do with early childhood development, how you ensure that children at an early age get the level of psychosocial training, that parents are able to get the support to raise those children, that we have after school programs, particularly in vulnerable areas and at risk areas, that you can improve economic opportunities for many of these marginalized young people, that you can work in your prison system to reduce on the levels of recidivism so that you don't have repeat offenders. So when these people are released from prison, we find a way to assimilate them back into society so that they're not looked at as ex-cons, but as people who have paid their debt to society and can be re-assimilated. That's how you have long-term goals, but we're not into long-term planning. We're into developing sound bites for manifestos and then saying that we'll do that as if that is a long-term plan. And what happens when the government changes, a new government comes in, it completely sets aside whatever the last government was doing because it doesn't want to give them kudos for what they were doing, and it comes up with a whole new set of plans. So every 5 years, you start all over again. It's like that movie 50 First Dates. I don't know if you watched it, but every year this guy had to re-court his girlfriend because she would suffer memory loss at the end every night, and he had to reintroduce himself to her. That's basically what goes on in St. Lucia every 5 years. We have to start from scratch all over again, and that is absurd, it's illogical, and it is really defeating our advancement in this country.
Thank you for that, Jimmy. You know, let me tell you, that's why I know I have to bring you back on Bouyon. I know I have to bring you back because we have a lot to discuss, you know. Like anything else, guys, all good things must come to an end. I want to there are a few comments here, Jimmy. I just want to go through before I give you the last words, right? Um, Hold on. I think it was right. Leona Bryce. Good night to you, Leona. She said, "Very true. People are so resistant to change, and that is why we are so backward. I love taking chances, and I believe in change." Peter Thomas also said, "Gaining our independence was a missed opportunity to sell or encourage a change in mindset because the political parties made it a partisan dogfight." And I think that kind of alluded to some of the things we've been saying tonight. Merlin just says, "Dr. Fletcher, we need you to educate and empower St. Lucians." And Peter Thomas just said, he is doing just that. Nadine Farrell said, "Amen, amen. So true in what you said." Leona Bryce just made another comment and said, "I totally agree with you. Whenever individuals can have a skill, they can become successful. I know people who have obtained degrees and have no skill in any job profession." And you know, we have quite a few comments here. I'll just read one more from Robert. Robert said, "Peter, that's a great show, very interesting." I didn't see you said that was a great show before I decided to read that one, okay? So he said, "Peter, that's a great show, very interesting. Hope someone is listening because Doc have not only point out the issues, but has also made recommendations." And you know what? You have, Jimmy, you have made so many. And I want to thank everyone who has contributed, who have participated in our discussion. I want to thank you guys so much. You know, again, he's right. You've identified some of the problems. You've even given solutions to some of those problems, or the way that we should, or they should, or the government should go about addressing this. You know, before we end the show, you know, guys, I want to ask you, Jimmy, as we continue our journey for independence, year after year, what is it that you think that we as St. Lucians can do to embrace the qualities of independence even more?
I think we have to put the politics aside. You know, I remember when I was a little boy and started following politics. The only time that really you were exposed to politics was during an election campaign. Yeah, you knew there were certain people who supported the Labour Party and certain people who supported the United Workers' Party. And when George Odlum came on the scene and started the political education of St. Lucians, he kind of increased the political atmosphere a bit. But even then, St. Lucian, the politicization of our society was confined to the period immediately around elections. Now, it doesn't stop. We just move from, you know, campaigning never stops. If your party is not in power, You bombard the airwaves with criticism of the government, and if your government is in office, you hit back at the other side for not giving you a chance to do your work. We have to stop that. As solutions, yes, support your party by all means. Be passionate about your party. And come election time, mobilize everyone to go out and support your party. But never forget the fact that you're solution. You were not born Labour, you were not born UWP. Even if you were born into a family that was always Labour, always UWP, the only thing your passport says is solution. It doesn't say anything else. And COVID has really shown us that when we are confronted by external threats, be it COVID, be it climate change, be it chronic non-communicable diseases that are ravaging us and that have caused our mortality from COVID to be even greater because we have so many people who are diabetic or who are hypertensive or who have all these other comorbidities. These things don't pay attention. When a hurricane strikes, it doesn't hit the houses that are Labour and leaves the houses that are UWP, and it hits all of us. So we really should find a way to work together as a nation. And that's why Douvan Ansanm, I think, is such a fitting theme, not just for this year, but moving forward. And that's what I would like to see us do as St. Lucians. I'm really passionate about this country. You know, I've had opportunities for me to work outside of this country after I left university and throughout, but I've always insisted that the only place that I want to work and live is St. Lucia because I love my country. Now, that's not to say that those who've chosen to work outside of St. Lucia don't love their country, but we do it in different ways. But for me, I've always felt that the contribution I can make is in St. Lucia. And I'm really passionate about St. Lucia. But you know what I'm really passionate about? Our young people. I see a level of entrepreneurial spirit and activity among young people that is greater than anything I saw when I was young, when I was their age. You see, if you check Instagram and Facebook and the kind of businesses they're doing, the things they're getting engaged in, they are not waiting for government to do things for them. They are going on and doing things for themselves. They're using the internet, they're using technology, using social media, using whatever means at their disposal to network, to create things, you know, and it is amazing that entrepreneurial spirit that resides within our young people. All they need is an opportunity to flourish. But in focusing on our young people, we can't lose sight of the fact that we also have a mature population that needs an opportunity to also contribute to the economic development of this country. And that's what I would like to see. I would like to see us understand that we have such great potential in this country, that we are shooting ourselves in the foot when we only give support to the people who support the party that's in power. Let's now rally everyone to move this country forward. Let's determine what our goals are. What are our moonshot goals? You know, President Kennedy determined that he would put a man on the moon as a moonshot, and that's why the phrase moonshot goal came. What are our moonshot goals? What are the things that we are committing to as St. Lucians that for the next 10, 15, 20 years we're working towards? I think those are the things that we need to focus on. Let's be aspirational. Let's try to inspire. What we see right now is too much halikasse, too much fighting, too much, you know, it's not contributing towards the advancement, the development of this country. And that is what pains me the most when I look at the country, the kind of potential that we have, and you look at what we're getting from it, it's not matching. And so my final words is I really would like to see St. Lucians come together, put the politics aside until it's time for elections, and let's work together, everyone, to advance the country. Because when you work with a UWP administration or SLP administration, you're not making SLP look good or UWP look good. You're making St. Lucia look good, and you're creating great opportunities for yourself. And I think that's what we have to get people to understand. And the government needs to be more inclusive, be more accommodating of differing opinions, be more accepting of constructive criticism. You know, understand that you do not have all the answers, that there are people out there who are more skilled and more experienced than you are and who can bring something to the table, you know, and embrace everyone. And if you can do that, then Peter, there's no limit to what this country can achieve.
You know, so well said. These have really been my thoughts, to be honest with you. I've always felt that every government who comes into power always favor their people, their people, their people. But my thing is, let us use the resources that's at hand, whatever the political alliance, you know, whatever party they belong to, let's use the resources. Let's come together as a nation, as a people, and stop the fighting. So, you know, Jimmy, I want to thank you so much for joining our show tonight. I mean, it was amazing, man. I had a great time here. I want to say thank you to everybody who who have joined our show. Thank you so much, guys, for being on here. I also want to say I always welcome suggestions of shows or things that you guys want me to touch on. So feel free to inbox me or send me an email at bouillonlive@gmail.com. Feel free to do so. And any suggestions you have would be welcome. So thank you for that. Once again, I want to say, Jimmy, thank you so much for being a guest on Bouillon. As anything else, all good things must come to an end. But I will extend another invitation to you at a later date to come. Let's just have a chat. Let's talk about the state of the union. Let's talk about the state of St. Lucia. Let's talk about what we can do to make our country better. How we, even the people in our diaspora, the people who are outside of St. Lucia, what they can do to contribute. You know, at Watch Radio, we always try to do something. You know, I was talking to my CEO earlier tonight, and he was just telling me, you're not gonna believe what I'm thinking of, man. But I know you do. I'm telling you now, I have a very big plan. I want to do X, Y, and Z to help some place in St. Lucia, and I'm not gonna mention because we have not discussed it fully. And I was like, whoa, boy, yeah, this is a big thing. And he's like, yeah, and I know we can do it. So that's what we about at Watch Radio. You know, we about helping. We try to do our best for us to help our St. Lucia brothers and sisters. You know, just recently, you know, we're actually working on trying to collect. We donated what, about 160, 170 tablets to schools. But you know, so we're now working on trying to collect from customs so that we could actually give it to the various schools. So these are some of the things that we do at Watch Radio. So I just want to thank you so much for being part of this show. I really do appreciate you accepting my invitation. You know, I really, really do. Once again, guys, I want to say thank you so much for joining us on Bouillon. Right now, I'm going to go because Papa Veda is waiting for me for him to perform tonight at
Can you
Bagadu.
say hello to Papa Veda for me, please,
I
Peter?
will definitely
Thank
do
you.
that because, yeah, I will see him tonight and he cannot start performing before I am there. So I have to tell him I am in the house before he starts. So, Jimmy, once again, I want to say thank you. I don't know if you have a last word you want to share before we go.
Happy Independence, St. Lucia, wherever you are, in St. Lucia, in the diaspora. All my friends in particularly New York, so many of them have a good independence celebration. I know you guys are as passionate about our country as we who live in St. Lucia. And I'm kind of happy about what you said, because I think, you know, we talk about the diaspora as what they can contribute, but I think we also have to see it as a two-way street. Why can't we in St. Lucia, if there's somebody in the diaspora who has an idea, why can't we contribute funds? There are people in St. Lucia who have funds and maybe can invest in a St. Lucian owned company in New York, in Canada, in the UK. I think we have to really make use. And again, it goes back to what I said about making use of our resources, whether they're resident in St. Lucia or in the diaspora, and working together. Because a St. Lucian who is successful in New York is a St. Lucian who is contributing to the development of his country or her country, either directly through remittances or some other support. And I think that's what we have to understand, that we're bigger than 185,000 people who live in St. Lucia. We are a large community spread out across the world, and we have to find a way to make everybody work together, because that is our goal. That's our diamond, that's our natural gas, that's our oil, that's our natural resource. And that's what's so important for us to harness and use.
Thank you so much for that, Jimmy. Before we go, I just want to say Peter Thomas said, great show, Jimmy. Thank you so much, Peter, for that. Kathleen says, thanks, Dr. Jimmy, for your time and great information. And we had, and Nadine Farrell said, I would like to meet Dr. Jimmy Fletcher to shake his hands. You know, what he said is so true. So once again, I want to say thank you guys so much for joining us. I want to say Sabina Daniel said, wonderful show. So thank you so much, guys. Gemma, good night to you. Good night to all. Jimmy, I want to say good night. You know, I will call you. So, you know, I will. All right, guys. Good night. So long. See you guys next week. Next week, you know, before we go, I want to say this because next week we're going to have a very important, not an important guest, but we have an important topic. You know, I saw there was an issue I saw on somebody sent me a WhatsApp message and they sent me a video of some guy who's, I think he's mentally ill or has, but he defecated in a church and somebody was beating him up. And it just, when that happened, when I said, no, I have to have a show on mental health. And I reached out to my friend, Shane, you know, Tall, and I said, we got to do this show. So next week, we're going to do a show on mental health. What is mental health? How do we address people who are suffering from mental health? Because that's important conversations that we do not have and we need to have. So I ask you guys, we here every Sunday from 7 p.m. Bouyon is always here, and we try to bring you informative, topics. We try to really encourage people to listen to the show. Again, I encourage you, if you have an idea for a show, please reach me via email. It's bouyonlive@gmail.com, and we will consider whatever the topic that you want to discuss. And if you are a resource and you feel you can contribute to the show, please also reach out to me at bouyonlive@gmail.com, or you can inbox me from my Bouyon Facebook page. I will respond. Once again, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank you, Jimmy. So long. Take care of yourself, and I will talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.